It's a very basic principle which we've mentioned endless times over. The concept of measure for measure. The way we behave, Hashem responds in kind. We find in Tilim, Hashem is referred to kitzelcha. God is our shadow. Just as when a person walks, his shadow reflects the person. That's what a shadow is. Identically, Hashem is our shadow. The way we behave, he responds in kind because he shadows us. His response to us is as we behave. So like a shadow follows the person, Hashem follows our behavior. So if a person is miserly, not giving, Hashem withholds. But on the other hand, if a person does chesed continuously, especially at a special level, Hashem will act in kind, measure for measure, will do chesed with that person. And chesed manifests itself on many levels. Person has illness, chas v'shalom, in his family, or himself. Hashem would intervene on behalf of that person to do chesed with him. Person has financial issues. Person has other issues. Measure for measure, Hashem will intervene and provide for that person. He will even provide for the world in the merit of that person, and that merit will accrue to that person because he's the one who activated that Hashem should respond to the world with chesed. That's the concept, measure for measure. So the Chofetz Chaim writes that, and he cites an Ahavas to Reb Nosson, which is compiled by Reb Nosson, who's a Tana, that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, who was the prince of the Jewish people, he was a student of Hillel HaZoken. He was walking Rabbi Yeshua, and they're walking by the Temple Mount. And Rabbi Yeshua crossed Temple Mount, it's destroyed, and he groans. And so he says, why are you groaning? He says, we have no kapora. We no longer have a Beis Hamikdash to bring korbanos, sacrifices for atonement. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai cites a verse that Hashem says, I want your chesed, I don't want your korban. I prefer your chesed than your korban. As a result of that, if a person does chesed appropriately, as he should do chesed, it as the korban, as the sacrifice atones, the chesed atones. It's interesting, there's a mitzvah that every male has an obligation to write a Sefer Torah. It's the 613th mitzvah in the Torah. What happens if you write a Sefer Torah, you purchase one, which also one fulfills the mitzvah if you purchase a Sefer Torah, and the Sefer Torah goes lost, or God forbid is destroyed. You have to purchase another one, or you have to have another one written. What about if you have it and you gift it to the shul? You want to give it to your shul, the synagogue, and you give it as a gift. The moment you give it as a gift, it's no longer your Sefer Torah, because monetarily it becomes the asset of the shul, of the synagogue. If that's the case, you have a new obligation. It's no longer yours. A male Jew must own a Sefer Torah as long as he lives. Excuse me one moment. As long as you own the Sefer Torah, it's yours. The moment you gift it to the shul, it's no longer yours. You have an obligation to have a new Sefer Torah written for you or purchased. So people don't realize it. They read a Sefer Torah, they have a celebration, and then they give it away. What they've given away the mitzvah of owning Sefer Torah. So you have to be smart. Okay, so let's talk. There's a mitzvah to lend money, positive commandment. What about you want to make money on the loan? Charge interest. You're not permitted to charge interest. The Jew is not permitted to charge a Jew interest when he lends money. But there is a way to construct a loan that it's not considered interest, but it's called a dividend. It's like an investment. If I go and I'm a silent investor in your business, and I put so much money and I get percentage of profits, it's not a loan. I'm an investor, and I get dividends on my investment. The concept of, it's called heter risko. It's a legal document which is structured a certain way that when you lend a person money, when he pays you a dividend on your money, it's not interest, but rather it's what? It's a dividend. It's not so simple. But the Chofetz Chaim points out, but if you do that, you know what you're doing. Even though the other person is a beneficiary because he structured it, but because you want to make a percentage on that loan in a permitted way, you're actually passing on the mitzvah of lending money. If it's structured that way, it's not called a loan. Because it's called a loan, you can't get any profit on the loan because that's called interest. So you're structuring it in a way where it's not called a loan. It's called, you return as a dividend. But by doing that, what have you given up? You give up the mitzvah of Chesed. It's no longer classified as Chesed. A loan, it's considered an investment. Okay, so he says, person has a large amount of money, and the interest on a loan of a large amount of money makes a difference in terms of your livelihood. Okay, so you lend money, and if you lend money, large amounts, like a person's a banker, that's his business. So by lending with the heter riska to Jews, the return could be very significant over time. But a person, he has a few coins, and he wants to maximize on the profit, even on a small amount of money. So what's the return on your money? You make a few cents profit. He says a few rubles. So to make a few rubles, what are you giving up? Giving up the mitzvah chesed. He says the lending money has relevance to every Jew. Your person, your medium income, you set aside $100 to lend. You give small loans. You want to borrow $10, borrow $10. There are people who would borrow $10, and the money circulates and is returned. You could continuously, you're in a state of doing the mitzvah of chesed. But if you lend the $10 and you're a pawnbroker, and everything you do is you got to leave collateral and so on and so forth, and you hope the guy never comes back. If that's the case, what are you giving up for what? You're giving away the store for pennies. That's called being penny wise and pound foolish. The few pennies you're giving away the store. So Chofetz Chaim says, therefore, anybody who really understands and appreciates the value of a mitzvah, where factually it's not a part of your livelihood. There's the mindset, you always want to make a few more cents. What are you doing? So it comes out you're not doing chesed. If you don't do chesed, the concept of mida keneged mida, measure for measure, is no longer in place. It's in place, you're a beneficiary of Hashem's chesed. As you do chesed, He will chesed you. But if you structure it within this heter riska concept, that to make a few slivers of silver, you're giving up what? You're giving away a mitzvah. He says it's foolish. That's firstly. Secondly, he says, the Gemara says in Ezo Nesha, it's the 5th parak in Bava Metzia, if you lend money with ribis, with interest, it has very serious consequences. Not only ultimately do you lose the interest payment, you even forfeit the principal. Hashem will punish you, you even lose the principal if you lend with interest. If this heter iska, this document, is not written properly, and he says you have to be an expert to know how to write this document, because if it's not structured properly, it's a loan, it's a documented loan, and it says in the loan you're paying interest. You may be thinking in your mind that it's a dividend, but since it wasn't constructed properly, in actuality, it's a loan for ribis with interest. Therefore, in actuality, you're playing with fire. So he says, firstly, if you're in the business, you're a banker or you're a lender with big amounts of money, it's one thing. You better get yourself expert advice how to write that document. But if you're a small person and the amount of money amounts to nothing, but you have this concept, I want to make money when I can make money in every opportunity, as little as it may be, and you don't do it right, not only you're forfeiting the mitzvah, but you're actually in violation of lending money ribis, which has very severe consequences. That's what Chavetz Chaim writes. But people in their minds believe that even when I lend you with a heteriska, even it's done, I'm doing chesed. I'm doing a mitzvah of lending money. You're making a big mistake. You're doing a mitzvah, because you want a return on your money. That's the impetus, that's the incentive, and that's why you're doing it. And if the man wouldn't give you the interest payment, or whatever you want to call it, you're not lending the money. So even though it's considered maybe chesed, because factually you're availing the money to that person, but it's at a very, very inferior level in terms of you should see a return on that chesed. Just want to read something inside. He says, I've seen, and I want to mention something which is vital, important. People, they want to do things in memory of their parents, right? Like endowment of a chair, or you put up a plaque in the shul, you give svarim, whatever it is in memory of parents. And they buy a very expensive tombstone, cost a fortune, on the grave of the parent. You hear this? And people pride themselves. Go to the cemetery, people amazed at the beauty. It's granite, it's engraved, it's this, it's that. But you tell me, what benefit does the parent have from that tombstone? No benefit. What about if you create a matzeva, where you create a gemach, a free loan, in memory of a departed parent, and all the money that's lent, all that chesed accrues to the person who passed away. That's considered a true monument. That is truly honoring the deceased, because what you did something a deceased person, when he passes away, can't do for himself. When you do for him by creating that free loan setting, so people could borrow without interest, so all the chesed is being generated is due to the person who passed away. That person becomes the beneficiary of that chesed. Okay? There's a response of Rav Henkin, who was a colleague of Rav Moshe Feinstein, Zech Tzaddik Livrocha. He wrote this in the 30s. You know, in the 30s, very few people who passed away outside of Israel were buried in Israel. Today, it's not unusual. People pass away and they're buried in Israel. But at one time, to bury in Israel was very, very costly. Very costly. So there was this family, their father passed away, and there was a question to bury him in the United States or to bury him in Israel. And it's not something the parents requested. It's something the children want to do to honor their father. They give him burial in Israel. So they asked Rav Henkin, Zecher Tzaddik Livrocha, what should they do? So he said, if you want to do what's truly in the best interest of your father who passed away, if you take that kind of money and you support Torah, whether it's a kollel or a yeshiva, and due to that amount of money, people who study Torah, that Torah accrues for the person who passed away. You bury him in Israel, which cost a fortune in those days especially. He has the merit of being buried in Israel. But in terms of what you could have accomplished with the same amount of money, if the interest is in the father, the deceased, you would have done better burying him domestically, and the money should go what to support Torah. That's what I can advise those people. 2 seconds. And understand the deceased. When we're in this world, we believe a lot of things. We delude ourselves. I'll give you an example. We say Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam. The value of studying Torah is the equivalent of the whole Torah its entirety. The world was created for Torah. We became the chosen people because we accepted the Torah. Everything's Torah. But yet, we have opportunities to study, and what do? We whittle away the time. Why? Even though cerebrally we may understand it, but if you have a business deal, which you're able to make 1,000% profit, return on your money, you're going to pursue that deal, especially if it's guaranteed. But yet, Torah, it's unquantifiable. The reward is guaranteed. Yet we brush it aside. Why? Because not able to relate and understand why it has that degree of importance. But when a person passes away and leaves this physical world, and you see things with absolute clarity, what does the person want? Even though you may not want to do certain things in your own life, but what does that person want? The person who's in what we call in the Olam HaEmes, in the true world, the world of truth, he wants not this tombstone on his grave. He understands all that glory, all that stuff is nonsense. It's futility. He wants one thing, something to benefit his soul. Benefiting his soul is only doing mitzvahs. People study Torah, do to him. People being fed, do to him. Whatever it is, that's considered meritorious. Anything less than that has no value. It's just what we call fluff. It's all called ego stroking. Beyond that, it doesn't have its value. The Gemara tells us in Eruvin that after a person passes away, the amount of tears that everybody sheds, it's the equivalent of a wellspring. As the wellspring continuously gives water, that's the way people are going to shed their tears. Everybody's going to cry. What are you going to cry about? Because we're going to recognize then, even if we did good things, a lot of good things in our lives, there were so many situations which we passed on for the sake of something which had no value, because we didn't appreciate it at the time. But in retrospect, when we're in the world to come, we recognize it. Then it's like a person berating himself, but it's too late. Once you leave this world, the opportunity the person passed on can be recouped, can't recoup it. Therefore, everybody sheds tears like well springs, unceasingly. See, even though nobody's perfect, but if you want to be smart and be responsible, you do what's the best for yourself. That whenever you have an understanding, you're able to do something, do it. Because once you pass away, you can't do it any longer. Or some certain situation, you have opportunities. The opportunity passes, you can't do it again. Let's say if a person is truly needy, and you're able to give him tzedakah. Comes to your door, and for whatever reason, you're too busy, you let him go. And the person was a very special person. And it would have had special value if you would have helped him. Somebody else now comes, he's not on that level. Although you're doing the mitzvah of tzedakah, but the first person you missed, you passed on. The second person is not equivalent to the first. Many years ago, there was a person that came to raise money for a school system named Rock. He was a nephew of the Chazon Ish. And he himself was a very special person. And he had to meet people who could give him substantial donations. People have money, everybody's knocking on their door. Everybody's knocking on the door. It reaches a point, person says, said, enough. So I called up this person who was a very significant man, and he was about tzedakah. When I say about tzedakah, I don't mean a philanthropist. He supported the right kinds of things. And he maybe he'd say he was overtaxed. So I called him up. I said, look, the special person's here. He's from Bnei Brak. He's a nephew of the Chazon Ish. Would you want to meet him? Maybe you could help him. He says, I'd be more than happy to meet him. And he met him. And I didn't know what happened. He called me up afterwards. He says, I want to tell you something. The person you sent me, I felt privileged that I was able to help him. I wish more people like him come to me so I should be able to help him. You understand? You have two people come for a needy. He wasn't collecting for himself. He was raising for an educational system in Bnei Brak. But again, him coming, somebody else coming, it's a different kind of coming. And the times in life we have opportunities to do something special, and you say, the timing is not right. Why? Because you don't truly appreciate the opportunity at the moment. But if you would appreciate it, there's no such time as telling me the timing is not right. You would do it no matter what. Just end with this one story. There's a certain person who I know. He's below the radar. He lives in Israel. You look at him, he looks like a person, dresses very humbly, looks like a Hasidic Jew. And he goes every morning to the Kosel for nets, for the sunrise minyan. And he gives people, approach him, he gives them money, but nobody knows who he is. He himself, personally, comes from Europe. He's a multi-millionaire. Baby's worth hundreds of millions. On the QT, he gives millions of dollars to tzedakah. And the way he gives it, it's not to be believed. The way a person that makes a business investment does his due diligence, and he comes up with ingenious ways to give it away where it's given anonymously, that the one who receives doesn't even know he's giving it to him. Right now, what's going on in Israel, the communities of the South were destroyed. People don't have what to eat. People are needy. And the person who's raising very significant amounts of money to cover the needs, he says to this person who he's close with, he says, I still need help. He says, so-and-so is holding my right hand while I'm swimming in deep water. I need somebody to hold my left hand. You're the one who should hold my left hand. The person says, let me think about it. Let me think about it. Within an hour, he got back to him. He gave him $1,250,000 within an hour. Instead, that's opportunity. To be able to appreciate the opportunity and not delay. Because always the evil inclination, he always gets you to put it on hold, procrastinate. Mitzvah presents itself. Don't let it become leavened. Don't let it become chametz. If you have an inspiration to learn. Don't put it off later, because the moment you put it off, the question is if you ever going back there. And that's the Chafetz Chaim. You're able to do things which have mega value, mitzvah-wise, and for a few cents, you construct it like an investment rather than a loan, and what you're giving up for what the return is, it's almost insanity. And that's the reason I always say, it says in Pirkei Avos, Aseh l'cha Rav, you need an advisor, you need a Rebbe. Because very often, because of our own conflicts of interest, or our lack of understanding, our own blind spots, we don't always do what's best for us. You need somebody who understands better to advise you. Whether you want to take the advice or not, that's your business. But if you value the person who's trying to advise you, you have a better chance of doing the right thing than doing it on your own. Because when you do it on your own, you always have your own way of seeing it. You have your distorted lens based on your own personal conflicts. When you hear it from an outsider, especially if he's your Rebbe, and he advises you, you have a better chance to succeed and do what's right for you, not what's right for someone else.